Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar, How to Scale and Optimize Microsoft Teams Voice and Meetings. Before we begin, I'd like to cover just a few items regarding this webinar platform. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a handful of widgets, mainly the Q&A widget, which you can utilize to submit any questions you have throughout today's webinar session. For viewing purposes, you can also expand your viewing window by clicking on the icon found on the top right corner of the slide viewer. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. And lastly, do take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it over to your presenter, Chad Gray.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Hey, today's topic, we're going to talk a little bit about using analytics to optimize Microsoft Teams voice and meetings. Our presenters here is myself. I'm a senior architect, lead in collaboration at Insight. And we have Nick who is a senior manager of product management with Vyopta. So I think, you're probably here because you're using Teams. You have, I'm going to say most everyone has had experience with Microsoft Teams. And these numbers probably don't surprise anybody, but this is something we've seen in the last year really just escalate and sort of a hockey stick type graph. So 115 million users, 2,000% plus increase in weekly meeting minutes, and a huge increase in video calls. Probably even more than that now as things continue and these numbers continue to rise. And I think that's just it just shows the narrative that we've gone over from the past year of the events that have happened, and we've moved into this remote workforce. And then as we start seeing a shift back into this hybrid workforce, we're seeing where Teams is becoming more front and center from an IT side and even from a user side. Is, hey, we've been using this at home, now we're coming to the office. What do we do? How do we use it from an end user aspect? And then from an admin, how do we manage this? How do we make sure we provide that continuity in those pieces, right? And it's just something we have to get our heads wrapped around, really, to move forward with, because we're going to be dealing with Microsoft Teams, and we're going to be dealing with remote workers. We're going to be dealing with video. That's just the way it is now. Where before it was a nice to have video, now it is a must to have. So a little bit about these patterns, that we're seeing. Still adjusting. Some people from this working from home from 1 year. Resources are still shifting to online from a paper. Most companies have made that, but some people are still transitioning there. And digital collaboration is the norm. One of the things I just purchased a new home, right? Did all of my closing and everything virtually, right? DocuSign was something, and that's sort of that digital transformation that a year ago, you're going into the bank, you're signing 15 different papers with a group of people face to face. So that's all. We're seeing these work patterns, these collaboration patterns of how we work with each other, not just within our own companies, but with other companies, really change. And then we're going to continue to see some more change, because now we're going to bring this office environment back into, we're going to go back to the office, at least at part-time. Some people may go full-time, some may go part-time. Some of the conversations I'm having is, okay, you have these collaboration rooms or these conference rooms or these video conference rooms. You know how they were used a year and a half ago. How are they going to be used today? And a lot of people are like, we're not sure. And then, well, if you're not sure, how do we manage those? How do we put the right equipment? How do we make sure we're utilizing that space to really cater to our workflow and cater to our end users? And that's where it says, hey, I hound on this, is that the expectation from a user is that doesn't matter if I'm at home or if I'm in the office or I'm in a Starbucks. My experience of joining and collaborating with you needs to be the same. I don't want to shift from one interface to another interface, or from one experience to another experience. I want that to be very seamless and from anywhere. And then as we do that, that's a key in this next piece is, right, how do we make everybody feel they're part of a team from anywhere? I've worked remote for 5 or 6 years now, full time. To me, I was already accustomed to that, of not working with somebody or being in the office or, running by the water cooler and having a talk. So I was accustomed to that. But for majority of users going home and working home and not having that day-to-day interaction, it was a lot different. Took some adjusting to. And you do have to make there has to be a dedicated or an intentional effort now with remote teams to make sure everybody is on the same page, that I feel like I'm working with a team. That for us, that if you've done that for a while, you've got accustomed to how to do that. But for most of the workforce, that wasn't something that they did. And so we have to really pay attention to that aspect of this new norm. As we say, work. Some people say the work of the future. It's really now. Well, how do we do that now? So these are some patterns we're seeing. We're seeing that Teams has driven some of that. The remote workforce has driven that. And so what do we do? How do we take these collaboration patterns that we're seeing with people and these needs and drive that into our business that is a manageable and a very good end user experience, right? And that's really the goal of Microsoft Teams. And it's to me, it's ironic that we were seeing Microsoft Teams come out. They came out, 2-3 years ago. Before that, we've been in the sort of, with this waving the flag of, hey, work from anywhere, use cloud, those pieces. I mean, that's been sort of, my flag I've been flying for a couple of years, 5 or 6 years now. But we were very tied to those offices and physical spaces and being physically in front of people until we were forced not to. And so Microsoft Teams was out before the pandemic and before this remote work, but timing was just impeccable because it was out, it had been tested, people were already migrating that way and sort of, putting their toes in the water. But then all of a sudden we had to. So, right, we had to enable new ways of working. And so when you do that now, all of a sudden, I can't go have a knock on somebody's cubicle door or their office door and say, hey, can we do this? Is this what we want to do? And they go, yeah, we can do that. Well, they're halfway across the country or they're across town. I have to be able to collaborate with them in some way and get those decisions very quickly now that I can't. I guess it is not that I could used to do in person. Get my words out. So we really got to accelerate that decision making and not keep waiting for the email chain to go on, right? So Teams allows us to do that with Team Chat, with video calls, and we can talk for an hour or so on the importance of video and how that really affects the way we communicate and gives us a sense of what the other person's intention and context is. But so we've provided that piece to accelerate the decision making, and then we're not going to be working the same workflow or in the same workflow or have the same experience as we did in the office. Let's just we're past that. So we have to drive some digital transformation. Again, back to that, like I said, the mortgage companies now, a lot of the bigger ones are using DocuSign and virtual closings and these things. You can now open bank accounts and everything digitally now that used to take us walking into a physical location, talking to someone, signing physical papers and those pieces. So modernizing those business practices, keeping everybody connected, keeping everybody in tune with each other is really where Microsoft Teams sort of shines, right? If we understand all the parts and pieces and we put it into the context of our particular workflow, that makes it work. Now, that statement right there is a lot easier said than done because it's just, oh, my slide went backwards on me. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Because we have to enable that collaboration to really get that done. So why Teams voice and meetings? I think a lot of us started out with Teams chat, right? We'll just use the chat And in some of us, it was a natural migration from Skype for Business into Teams chat and Teams channels. And we got used to the Teams channels and those parts and pieces and work those into our workflow. And, that plugs right into the Office 365 environment of document and content management. And so that was great. But now as we went remote, we're using Teams for voice calls. We're using it for meetings. So why is it the future of the collaboration? Where does it fit in? Voice integration with business applications. I've said this for a couple of years. We're going to see voice become just a plug-in for applications, right? Just as we sort of see email nowadays, right? If I've got whatever my application is, I can email directly out of the application. It's just it's just built in, right? We don't expect we will not expect voice to be a different application infrastructure than what our business applications are. It's going to be integrated. PSTN resiliency, right? We've been in the infrastructure side of the business. You've always fought with that. How do I keep my phone calls up from anywhere, everywhere? Huge problem last March when everybody went home is how do I get my phone calls that come into my corporate office out to my end users? But the cloud, that's the cloud story, right? The cloud solves that. It's now our PSTN is available anywhere, everywhere, as long as we have a connection back to the Microsoft cloud, or let's just say connection to the internet. Making voice a natural part of the workflow process. So how do we go from taking a call into what we have a call, we're collaborating on a document, we need to share that document, and then have another call with other end users to collaborate with on that, right? That voice just becomes a part of that workflow process, but not all of it, right? I'm not going to say, hey, I work with my product manager, Anna, a lot. Hey, I'm going to call Anna up, tell Anna, these are the changes we need to make. Anna, thanks. Let me know when you get those changed. No, I'll call Anna up. I'll make the changes on a shared screen with her. We make the changes at the same time, talk through it, end it, share it out to the rest of the group, get okays. And it just becomes a really natural process. And that puts content and collaboration on the same page. Same place, right? Everything that I'm doing, everything I'm working on is right in one piece. And then, I did, PSTN to remote workers. That's remote workers, traveling workers, anybody, wherever you're at, you have the PSTN. You can get your calls or make your calls from your office. So there's the advantage. We see where the work's coming from, where we've changed from a collaboration standpoint, what the tool sets that we've been provided or really that the industry has came up with. Really wasn't a pandemic response. It was really prior to that. We were sort of foreshadowing what we needed to do. And then why it needs to happen. So a little bit is that, okay, great. That sounds great, Chad. How do we get there, right? How do we get especially from a voice side? Meetings is usually pretty easy. I'm on one meeting platform. I want to move to another meeting platform. Most of them are subscription-based at this point. Move it over and get the right piece of hardware. That's an easier conversation, but then you're like, well, hey, we're talking about this voice because we need to integrate it all in together. We've got the content because we're using Teams and Office 365. We've got the voice. we've got the meetings piece, but how do we get the voice in there? So I just wanted to touch a little bit on this before we start talking about, hey, how do we manage this and get the analytics out of this, of how do we get from point A to point B? Because I think this seems really, really complicated to some, or especially from I'm an old phone guy. How do we go to Microsoft Voice? How do we go to Teams Voice? Because that's not what I'm used to. So just a little bit, and what you'll hear is direct routing. So direct routing is a piece of the puzzle that says, hey, how do I connect my existing phone system to the PSTN? How do I connect Teams to the PSTN, or how do I connect Teams to my existing phone system? For most of us, we can't go through and just say, hey, Friday night, we're switching over to a new phone system. We need to gradually go there. We need to integrate the Teams voice, and then we need to slowly or in phases move sets of users over. So really two options, and this is a whole another probably 2-3 hour conversation, or we could go through in detail here. But two options with direct routing. This is basically connecting Teams, the Teams PBX, to your third-party PBX, whatever that might be, with a SIP trunk. Let's just keep it that simple. Microsoft will call it direct routing. So I do that with a session border controller. Voice trunk to the PSTN, back to the session border controller. The session border controller, which handles my voice trunk, is connected to my third-party PBX, and through that is connected back to the Microsoft 365, right? So a Teams user makes a call, it goes to the session border controller, and either sends it to the third-party PBX for an internal call or sends it to the PSTN. That's what we see most of the time. And just think of it as in what we would call in the old days a tie line between two PBXs. That's what we're doing with direct routing. Make it simple. The other option to do this is the same concept, but we're now using the power of the cloud. So in the first one, I am on-premise with my session border controller. Again, we lose some resiliency to PSTN. We can architect around that, but it gets a little more complex and sometimes more expensive. With Teams and Office 365, since it's in the cloud, why don't I put my session border controller in the cloud, connect that back to my third-party PBX, connect that back to Microsoft in the cloud, and now that gives me the ability to be very resilient with my session border controller, with a hosted border controller. So we have partners we work with, and so as I subscribe to a session hosted directed routing, I may have 5 or 6 of those globally hosted in the cloud. So if one goes down, the other one goes up. Very cost effective when you start talking about doing that from a premise base to a cloud base. But I think that the gist of this, I just wanted to go real briefly, is this is how you go from you connect your third-party PBX to your Teams environment, and that allows you to start slowly or quickly, however fast you want to. That allows you to do a phased approach migration into the Office 365 until you transition off your third-party PBX. So a little technical there. I didn't want to get super technical, but just to give you an idea of how do we go from one side to the other side to really, and that's the piece that always seems to be missing. Chat is easy. Meetings is easy. The voice is, how do we do that? Will it work? I mean, can it work with other phone systems? Definitely can. So that'll be the techie part of this, but that gets us into Teams, right? Now we've got everything in one place. We can really integrate this into our business, integrate this into our workflow, and make it work for us. So let's just take a break here, just to get an idea from you guys. If you're using Teams, or maybe you're not, but I would say 90% of people in some form or fashion are using Teams within their environment from what I'm seeing. What other collaborations do you see are using locally in your organization? Give me a few minutes. If you don't mind clicking on there and letting us know, we'll see. But and there should be, there's a lot more than this. We tried to pick up some of the popular ones there. Give you all a few seconds for that. All right, so Cisco, Zoom, Poly, and that's the norm of what we see. Probably a year or 2 years ago, Cisco was on the top side of that. Zoom has been a very aggressive and taking some market share there. And I think that's just from a step back and look at this. Both of those, and Polycom has their solution too. Cisco, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams, those are the 3 leaders in the meeting platforms nowadays. Feature to feature, it's hard to say one's got better features than the other. They all pretty much have the same features. If they don't today, they probably will. If one's lacking something this month, they will probably have it next month. And that's the beauty of being on a cloud platform, is that the updates and the feature sets come along so fast. So when we look at that, it's like, okay, wow, they're all, we can all use them. They all have sort of the same features. There are some exceptions to that, but then why not go to Teams meeting? And if I go to Teams meeting, now I've got everything, again, back to that end user experience, all the same. So now, if you are using Teams, which vendor are you looking at? And I'll give you some time to look at these and answer this. So, if you're in a Cisco WebEx world, you're using Cisco hardware. Zoom, they use a variety of vendors. And Microsoft the same way. So HP, Lenovo, Logitech, Poly, Yealink, Crestron's another one that's not listed on there. All have devices or team rooms or collaboration bars for Microsoft Teams. Again, why is this? Why are we? I want to bring this up because in a world where the hardware and the software and all the hardware is the same, the management becomes very easy. In a world where now we've got mixed vendors, we've got Microsoft running the platform. We could have HP. We could have all 3 or 4 of these within our rooms, depending on the needs of our rooms from a meetings perspective or even from a voice perspective, from an endpoint. How do we manage all that? Because now I'm managing 3 or 4 vendors and I'm managing Microsoft. So it becomes a little bit more, from an administrative side, a little bit more overhead, right? A lot of Poly out there, a lot of HP. We're seeing Lenovo's coming out with some nice stuff. Logitech has really stepped up their game, and Yealink is starting to make more of a play here in the States as far as what their portfolio of devices are coming out. But again, now you just the gist of this is, hey, we have to manage multiple vendors. We also have to manage another platform. And if we go back to the slide before that, we may have multiple platforms that we're managing, right? We may be managing WebEx and Microsoft Teams, Zoom and Microsoft Teams. We may have all 3 in our environment. So sometimes it's hard to get into an environment where it's only one vendor, even though it's, from an IT aspect and the admin aspect, that's where we want to go. So I've already talked a lot about these challenges. I'm going to show that through, give that to you here. And that's really where we're headed. Is great collaboration platform, great end user experience, but how do you manage that? It's in the cloud. How do I see all the parts and pieces to that, to see that? How do I know what's going on? How do I know what my end users are using? And that's where I want Nick to step in on these next slides here and really go through that and show how we can, with Insight and Vyopta together, we can really bring that visibility and ease that administrative challenges that Teams sort of presents. So, Nick, I'm going to go over your slide and let you take over.
All right. Thanks, Chad. And hi, everyone. As a brief intro, my name is Nick Week. I'm on the product management team at Vyopta and really excited about what Insight and Vyopta are putting together, where our solution, our code, our technology is being powered by the expertise at Insight. And so what I'll walk through is kind of building off of everything that Chad talked through. There's still a ton of challenges around Microsoft Teams, and the combination of our technology and Insight's expertise, we think we're going to solve a lot of them for folks like yourselves. So what I'm going to walk through are a couple problems, how that is different for different practitioners and IT leadership, how we solve those problems, what that ultimately means to you. And we're going to get straight into the tool and walk through 3 different use cases that are highly valuable for MS Teams scenarios. We'll highlight how Vyopta is unique and adds incremental value compared to what Microsoft gives you. And then also talk about how the Insight managed service comes into this as well. So with that as a tee-up, why Vyopta for Microsoft Teams? And the way we like to put a framework around this is we really help 2 different personas at our customers. There's the practitioner, the person who's on the ground, the person who, when that angry email comes across from the CEO or the partner that said, I had a bad Microsoft Teams call, the troubleshooter is going to go out there and fix it. Then there's the IT leadership team, and that could be the CIO, it could be somebody under the CIO. But what does this ultimately mean for your organization? When we talk about digital transformation and we talk about who's responsible for moving folks over to Microsoft Teams and making those decisions, there's very different problems that a similar solution can solve those problems, and it's different value back to the business. So a couple ways that we like to talk about this. First, if you think of a problem for a practitioner is that VIP issue. If you ladder that up for an IT leadership perspective, it's really business critical services that aren't operating. What we're able to provide are VIP alerting and monitoring, which we'll walk through here in a bit. And then if you look at the next elements that we're going to be going through, troubleshooting and the time that you spend getting to why calls were having issues. That's the practitioner persona. The IT leadership is looking at this really from an OpEx perspective. Time is money, time is resourcing. We saw all of those stats around, usage is going up and to the right. Your costs cannot be going linearly up and to the right because the expectation is that you're scaling this out. And so we're going to help you all with purpose-built troubleshooting that's going to speed that up significantly for that practitioner, and then it's going to keep those collab OpEx low. Then really, I think Chad mentioned a key word there, visibility. So when you're that practitioner, it's very tough to know, am I dealing with one issue that happens to be the executive who's angry at me? Or is this the tip of the iceberg and everyone else is having issues right now? And I'm about to, my afternoon's about to get blown up with all of these issues. So not knowing that from a practitioner perspective is incredibly unnerving. But what that ladders up to for the IT leadership is really impacted productivity. So what we're able to provide is environment-wide visibility and the tools that enable you to go from environment-wide to very prescriptive. So what does this mean across the board? As a practitioner, you're getting less high-stress incidents. You're getting less revenue loss incidents from a leadership perspective. From those stressful times troubleshooting, you're getting, you're lowering the mean time to resolution. You do that over time. That's less OpEx, collab OpEx. And ultimately, if you're figuring out those systemic issues, you're increasing your confidence, the quality of what you're delivering as a practitioner. And as an IT leadership team, you're helping productivity, you're helping increase the ROI of your investment. So that's why we're here. Whether you're a practitioner or an IT leadership member, everything on that right side, that value is what we're aiming to deliver. And I'll walk through how we're delivering that value with Insight. So the first example here, we're going to talk about that VIP or executive monitoring use case. And really what we want to deliver is helping you to know before they complain and helping to maintain business continuity. And we'll walk through that, and I'm going to kind of do a quick orientation around our product as a whole while we jump into this. So let me share out my screen. All right. I'll take you over into the Vyopta product, and I'll refresh this here. Great. And here we go. So as a quick bit of Vyopta 101, what we're looking at here is CPM monitoring. That is one of our three main modules. Where monitoring is your live troubleshooting and alerts. Analytics is your what we call the purpose-built BI tool for collaboration. And Workspace Insights is kind of our newest module that looks at more of an IoT play for specific endpoints in rooms. For the sake of this conversation, we're going to really focus on CPM monitoring, CPM analytics. By the way, CPM standing for Collaboration Performance Management. So what we're looking at here is in the CPM monitoring module, where your eyes are probably going is up here. It's this time picker. So we are looking at live views of data streaming in. You can go in and adjust your time window to something more recent, and everything will adjust here. I like to do last 4 hours, but you can go back as far as 30 days. You can also go back to a specific point in time in case you want to go in and troubleshoot anything that's happening there. So I'm going to go to last 4 hours here. I like this view. It's a good window into recent history. And what you're seeing below, these are all dashboards that are visualizations of our different data sets. And then I'll jump into that VIP use case. So all of these dashboards can be KPIs, trends, data sets. You get a number of them out of the box, so you don't start with that kind of empty restaurant. But you can obviously customize these as much as you want. And so you can add in new dashboards. You can customize the ones that are here. You can go in and edit this, and everything is semantic. There's no need to learn a new query language. It's really simple to use. So the different data sets are super helpful to understand very quickly, and that we can help you in a number of different capacities, whether it's infrastructure and your on-premise elements. trunks. So I know Chad talked about a lot of that voice connectivity. We're going to help you understand that logical connection between different pieces of infrastructure. Endpoints, which is a lot of Vyopta's proprietary IP around endpoint statuses and peripheral statuses. And then the two most important ones here that I'm going to dive into are your meetings and your calls. So from a meetings perspective, this is where we're able to go in, and you'll notice here there's a lot of Zoom, Hexip, Skype. We are multi-vendor. We're going to focus here on system name, Teams. We're going to filter down into your MS Teams. And here we can go in and understand what's going on a meeting level perspective, see all of your different participants. I'll come back to quality because that's really critical for us. But you can see this this meeting, the different participants that are a part of it at that meeting grain. And then if we go back to calls, this is where we're really unique in the sense that this is every participant leg and every additional call leg that Vyopta adds into the mix. We apply our quality algorithm to this. And so if you think of single pane troubleshooting, you've got stuff in your UCM CDR that's somewhat legacy. You've got all sorts of MS Teams activity. You acquired another company and there's some sort of Zoom or WebEx in there as well. We put it into one single pane to make it really easy to go in and troubleshoot at that level. I'll come back here to visualize this in a chart. I kind of call this the Vyopta in a chart. We can go in and we have the technology to stream all of your different data sources into one platform here. So that kind of got you oriented a bit with our product. Let's jump into those use cases and what's really top of mind as folks are transitioning to Microsoft Teams. And the first one is that VIP and executive use case. And what you're looking at here is our ability, because we're that kind of purpose-built tool for monitoring, we can go in and start to tailor your environment in near real time. As soon as this data gets in from Microsoft, we can go in, and if you look under the covers here, we have our 4 executives. We can go in and alter this. Again, it's really easy. It's all semantic and or filtering. Looking at these different call records, you can see the individual calls. We have advanced processing to look at things like min, max, average. So if you want to give that white glove service and stay on top of what's going on with your executives, you can. And there's some great functionality here too. So let's say I want to go ahead and clone this so I can get those executive calls over time, but I want to go in and rather than look at all calls, I want to go and see this by quality. Go ahead and do that in a click. This applies Vyopta's quality algorithm into the mix, which I should add. We are the only ones who look at video and presentation as a factor of quality. The Microsoft tools do not. So where this becomes really helpful is you can go in and start to look at, all right, here's all of the bad quality calls for my executives over time that you can see in a chart here. And the last thing I'll go through, I'm going to go ahead and actually move this over to an alert. It's great to have that dashboard view where you're looking at it 24/7, but obviously we need to let Vyopta do the work for you. So here's those exec calls over time. I'm going to go in and add, where quality contains bad. And all of a sudden, we've built out and spotted exactly where there were bad quality calls here. We're going to set this as a monitor, which is going to save in our monitor rules over here. There's some great new functionality where, hey, if this is ever greater than or equal to 1, that's going to be the warning level. It's greater than or equal to 2. Less than. Do this guy here. So you'll see different severity levels there. You can go in and cater this. If it's a warning, you may not want to send an email, but if it's critical, you do. So we did a ton of research with our users over the past 6 months after the pandemic broke out, and setting this up and saving it here. It creates a living list of all of your different monitors that you care about, in this case for executives. I'm going to go back over here. And here are your different rules, your CEOs, your VIPs. Again, if you think about what Vyopta can monitor and how granular and easily you can get to that dashboard that you care about, here's now that list of everything that's clear, info, warn, critical. And the great part about this is working with Insight. They have that perspective of working with all of our Vyopta customers in which we partner. you can go in and quickly start to get those right thresholds, the things that matter, avoid being noisy. And you, one, have that dashboard where you can come in and easily see what's going on, whether it's environment-wide or just your VIP executives. And now with those monitors set up, and you can integrate this via email into things like ServiceNow, to get it out to your frontline teams, you're staying ahead of this before it becomes an issue. So that's how we help in a Microsoft environment, where you can get granular down to who's making the calls, the quality of the calls, even the ratings on the calls. I think it's a great way to make it a little bit more real, is to think of the fact that right now there are probably executives at your company who are giving 1- and 2-star ratings in Microsoft Teams, and you don't have any visibility into that. We built that automated pipeline to alert you on that, to plot it here, to help you understand that really easily and see exactly what's going on. So that's one way that we can absolutely help from a VIP perspective. So if we go back over here, and there we go. One way that we help, something else that's very common kind of post-pandemic, is being able to help you understand the hybrid workforce. So what is something that is really in my control that I need to have a high SLA on? What's coming from home? And with Microsoft Teams and our pipeline that we've built to handle the scale of Microsoft, we're able to go in and help you delineate by IP address what calls are coming from where. So if we go back in here, go ahead and share my screen back over here. Here's a great dashboard that a lot of our customers are using. It's a little wider here, to understand the call records that are from your corporate office versus those that are from your home office. You can get down to the individual details here, and you'll notice that a lot of this is under the covers looking at your IP address. And so what this is going to help you do, and you'll notice the different KPIs here of your average bad quality calls from home versus your total from home. You can very quickly eyeball this and see that you're less than 1% of your total calls from home are bad. You can barely see the red and yellow here, but your corporate office, where folks who are coming back and expecting to be more productive, you're getting a much higher share at roughly 10% of your bad quality calls there. So being able to hone in and see exactly where your fair and bad quality calls are, whether that's in the office or at home, it's going to help you, because there's a lot of those expectations that Chad was talking about. It doesn't matter if you're in the office. It doesn't matter if you're at home. People are expecting the same type of support. And so you'll need to be able to quickly triage and troubleshoot that. And then also it's really helpful when the CIO and the C-suite comes back and says, hey, it seems like things are different, post-pandemic when we came back. And there's a lot of opinions flying around quality at home versus in the office. You'll be able to quickly come to the table with data in those types of scenarios. So I realize I'm running a little bit behind on time, but do want to get to the last use case, which will be actually a little bit more slides here. We talked a lot about that, hey, there are a lot of opinions going around, and boy, we're coming back into the office. And one, how do you plan it? And two, how do you have data that proves different opinions? So from a planning perspective, one of the best parts about Vyopta is we're able to tag or augment the data and then continually keep that up to date with all of the actual performance of the data. So what you're looking at here is an anonymized look at a client where we were able to go in, help them as folks were looking at re-entering, tagging different users on which offices they would be assigned to. So essentially giving a high watermark for how much activity is taking place while everyone is at home in terms of concurrent meeting activity, in terms of audio versus video, looking at bandwidth, helping them plan back as you start to stage these different rollouts of folks going back to the office. It's no longer 10 people in one meeting room making one call out. It's going to be 2 people in that meeting room, another 4 people in from their desks, but in the same office, and then another 4 people at home or scattered around the world. So how do you spot those different bandwidth constraints? And that's what we do really well, is tagging that, augmenting that data, from a static tagging perspective, and then from a dynamic tagging perspective. What you're looking at here is us tagging by, in this case, VPN. So being able to go to the C-suite when they complain and say, hey, yeah, we're getting a lot of bad quality calls. I think it's X, Y, or Z. This was one of our customers that used our data and our dynamic location-based insights with IP addresses, like in Microsoft Teams, that we're able to deliver, where we're going to the table with data proving that it's your VPNs, in particular your first and primary VPN here, versus on the bottom your non-VPN calls. When you look at that call quality and what Vyopta can provide there, we're bringing data to the table so that you're able to really close the loop on taking things from opinions and moving them over to facts. So to round it out here on this last slide, I think it's hopefully we highlighted a couple pain points that we can solve in our tool here and in the slides. But how does this all work? The way Vyopta is architected is a cloud-to-cloud setup for Microsoft Teams. If you can put in your Microsoft Teams credentials, you'll have data flowing in minutes. And so as we look at this out here, how Vyopta incrementally adds value. So we cleanse this data and augment it. We add in our algorithm that, again, videos up and to the right, your Microsoft tools will not give you video quality. We add that into the mix. We categorize your different endpoints to look at software versus hardware versus Surface Hubs and Microsoft Teams Room, and we allow you to tag in the custom capacity there. We have what we believe is the industry-leading alert engine, so you can get incredibly granular on who's making calls, on objective quality with our algorithm, on subjective quality with their user ratings. There's custom thresholds, tailored notifications, so you can stay ahead of those issues. Again, if you're on that leadership side, it's those business-critical services that you're staying out in front of. If you're on that practitioner side, it's those angry emails that you're moving on before they can hit send. And lastly, we're ready out of the box with that Power BI-like functionality in a automated reporting, customization of dashboards. That's good to go out of the box and super easy to use. But what we really like with this partnership is the fact that Insight is there with you. They have the best practices from all of their Microsoft customers. They're managing the monitoring. They're customizing the analytics for you. And it really creates this great loop here, because with that data, that's the diagnosis. They're also offering the prescription. So what are the systemic improvements, the investment changes, ads, moves, changes that you need to make that Vyopta added that previously you didn't have that visibility into? So what are those changes you can make? And then with that, did that improve performance? How do we continue to monitor it? And it becomes a great flywheel where you have the kind of diagnosis and that expert data and that expert view and visibility from Vyopta, as well as the prescription and the expertise from Insight, helping you to manage this much more efficiently. So as you can tell, we're super excited about this partnership, and I think Chad and Insight team, we're going to hand it back over to you all to close us out here.
Sorry, guys, on mute, trying to talk there. But thanks, Nick. Appreciate that. I know we're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to go through this real quick because I've got a question I want Nick to help us answer. But basically, like as Nick said, we partner with Vyopta. We're using Vyopta in our managed services. So not only do we have a world-class managed service to support your team from a Teams voice and Teams meeting, we also provide that Vyopta interface, that Vyopta monitoring and alerting, and all the other analytics that Vyopta provides. On the backside of that is we also provide that reporting and are taking on that role of looking at that data for you and trying to give you some guidance so you can do what you do during the day, and we can manage this environment and let you know where you're headed and what your next steps would be. So a couple of things we offer. Our managed services there. You just need to step your toes in the water. Hey, we have a proof of concept on the voice and the meeting side that we can do. That can come in and get it just set up, let you take a test drive. Works really well. And for information on that, reach out to your account executive, or you can email us there at the email address there. But real quick, Nick, I don't know if you saw that. For those that can hang on, there was an email from Glenn, a question from Glenn about the you tagging employees based on the office. If someone's half and half, is there still a way to track that, or how does it handle that in the back end?
Absolutely. I have a feeling, Glenn, you've been faced with something that a lot of MS Teams leaders and admins are faced with right now. So the great news with Vyopta is we have two types of tagging, and you can combine them to answer a lot of different questions here. There's the static tagging, which is where we like to kind of position that is, this is the office in which that user is assigned to. So that'll help you to understand, hey, this population of users that are assigned to, Office A, what does their call activity look like? Then there's the dynamic insights-based lookups. So that's where we have our algorithms that take your IP address on all of your specific calls, map it back to your IP address and network lookups. So that is usage-based versus somewhat static. And you can, again, combine these two to get to different insights. So show me all of my users who are assigned to this office, where are they actually making their calls? And start to break that out to see if it's in that office, in a different office, still from home. So it's really going to help to understand both sides of the coin, where Vyopta has the static tagging and then the dynamic IP-based lookups where you can see what network they were on as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. So again, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to talk to you more about Teams voice and meetings and how we can really drive some of that management analytics with you with Vyopta in our managed service. If there's any other questions, feel free to post those in there. We can still answer those. And otherwise, thank you for attending and taking the time today. And sorry we ran just a little bit long, but really do appreciate everyone joining us today.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, that concludes today's webinar. A big thank you to the presentation team today and to the attendees. Thank you for the time and opportunity to come together. With that, we'll turn you back to your day. Thank you.